Well, no one has seen Huntington Woods native Danny Fenster since the military regime in Myanmar detained him as he was trying to leave the country. He was on his way home to Michigan. He's believed to be in the notorious insane prison where the regime puts political prisoners.
Welcome to Deadline TV. We've got Danny Fenster, who was in the news for the last 6 months. He was in a prison in Myanmar. And so, Danny, welcome home.
Thank you. Good to be home.
Yeah. One of the first questions some people ask is like, why Myanmar? What attracted you to go there?
It's a number of things that are probably not even completely understood to me, but the writer George Orwell has a history there, and there's sort of an obsession with George Orwell. That's part of it. My brother and I used to volunteer with a refugee resettlement program in Chicago more than a decade ago. And we met Burmese families. Myanmar used to be called Burma. Some people still refer to it as Burma. The U.S. government recognized it as Burma. So these Burmese families, and we got pretty close with some of them. That played a big role. I think that just the age that I was at, I was starting to kind of pay maybe too much attention to the actual number and getting a little freaked out that certain things that 17-year-old Danny always thought he would do, he still hadn't done. And some people, I think, buy a cherry red sports car. Yeah. And other people do journalism in Myanmar. Right.
So there you go. Skip forward quite a bit. So you were working at Myanmar Now, then you went to Frontier Myanmar. May 24th. You were at the airport.
Yeah.
Were you thinking I'm going to visit, or were you thinking like things are getting a little too crazy here? Maybe it's time to get out of here.
Well, it was a question that was left open in the air. My partner Juliana is a Brazilian diplomat, and that afforded me fairly recently. I had gotten a diplomatic passport, Brazilian passport, and we thought, well, it might be hard to come back if you're in media. However, diplomatic passport. The plan was for her actually to come to Detroit after me. We were going to visit the family, see the United States a little bit, a little vacation, and then come back together using the diplomatic passports to return. If we did that, I could stay there on a visa as her partner without needing to have a visa through a journalism outlet, basically, and it would allow me to stay at a time that a lot of journalists couldn't be there. That was the vague plan. We were also open to the idea of not returning, not being able to return, and finding a new plan and a new direction. Now, I can't go back, but this experience makes me feel even more wedded to the country.
Really?
Yeah.
And so here you are. You're at the airport, and how close were you to actually boarding on the plane?
We were. It was about 10 seconds before they had us queue up to board.
Wow.
They distributed PPE to everybody that was waiting to board. Gown, hairnet, gloves. I took a selfie or sort of a photo of myself in a mirror, sent it to Juliana. Hey, look at this, isn't this nuts? Just for a flight, completely scrubbed down like a surgical tech or something.
Right.
Sat back down, waiting for all of us to queue, and all of a sudden a group of police walk up to the lady who's working the check-in, and they said they're looking for Daniel Jacob. Jacob is my middle name. And it just took me by surprise. They said, we have some questions. I said, okay. We walked back to a questioning area, and
were you worried at that point, or were you just thinking like?
I was worried in the sense of my face was flushed, my heartbeat was up, but I wasn't worried in the sense I'm about to spend 6 months in insane prison.
Right.
I thought. I got a couple text messages off to Juliana. I said, I'm being detained, call the embassy, call the American embassy, do what you can. I'm sure they're going to take my phone soon. And then they took the phone. But I just had the kind of ridiculous presumption, I think, that a lot of Americans or Westerners have, that, well, somehow I'll get out of this, or my country, my representatives will get me out of this. And that idea persisted for a while in the beginning.
Did you go to a court first before, or did you go to the prison?
I mean, I was with the police and in a police station being questioned and interrogated for some time. And then I was sat in front of a judge. I mean, it was like a closed, secret military court that was a part of the prison. It was already at the prison.
So you were at the prison, right?
Well, yeah, that was the first place I went. I was blindfolded at the airport, put in a van, taken to a police station, blindfold off, interrogation, blindfold back on, driven to the court, sat in front of the judge. No more need for a blindfold. I didn't realize it at the time, but you're already in the prison compound. The court was already within it. So she said, you're charged with this 505A offense. Your next hearing it was 2 weeks from the day. It was June something. You're locked up until then.
Did you have a cell? Or
I had
what?
a cell, yeah.
Okay, and describe the cell. What was that? What was that like?
So it's like 2 rows of cells. One row, 2 buildings, each with 10 cells. Right. And they are like a 9x7 room. Concrete floor and walls. Squat toilet in one corner.
Toilet, just...
It's a porcelain hole in the ground.
Okay.
And a little spigot of water next to it that you just rinse, kind of dump and flush yourself. A wooden pallet, and they brought a blanket. Pillows are weirdly not allowed.
Oh. And how about dress? Did they give you a prison outfit, or were you just wearing civilian clothes? Or?
I mean, I had come from the airport packed, ready to come home. They took anything out of my bag that I wasn't allowed to have in prison. That left a bunch of clothing behind. They said, take what you want. I still thought Team America is going to come save me. I thought this isn't going to last very long. I took maybe a tote bag's worth of clothing with me. So I had my own clothes. They don't give you prison issue clothing unless or until you're convicted. Until then, you're detained and on trial, but you're still in detention while you're on trial. Once you're convicted, they give you a blue shirt and a blue longi. Longi is a long sarong sort of thing that men and women wear in Myanmar.
So you had some clothes. Were you able to wash those clothes?
Yeah, wash. I mean, you're washing everything by hand. They give you some prison issue soap. You can buy soap that's better, that smells nicer. That's actual laundry soap. I had a little scrub brush and a little bucket. And you fill up the bucket with soapy water and dunk it and soak it and dunk it, pull it out, scrub all your clothing down, rinse it all off, and non-soapy water, wring it out, hang it.
And how big was this cell? Was it
It was about 9 feet by 7 feet. I mean, it wasn't, I wasn't confined like a sort of stock pig or something, but it's tiny.
And were there bars, or was it a door, or?
It's a concrete block, but the front door is bars, and the little window up in the top back is bars. Yeah.
And so is there a regiment like every day when you were there, or is it just whatever? There's not like, okay, 7 a.m., breakfast time, or how did that work?
The only regimented thing there was the door is unlocked in the morning at 7 a.m. You have to go back in for lockup at noon till about 1:30 or 2, and then you're out if you want to be out. And then they lock the door again at 5:30 or 5:45, depending on the day. So you didn't have to be anywhere. You could stay in your room all day if you wanted to, or you could, yeah.
And was there a certain time for meals and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, roughly 39. It wasn't very strict. They would bring a couple buckets, a big bucket of white rice, and then a big bucket of, in the morning it was a bean soup. And in the evening there were a few different things. Sometimes you get 2 eggs and rice. Sometimes you would get another kind of vegetable soup, very watery little soup, and rice.
And was somebody serving you, or was it
No,
just you,
no,
you
no.
just...
They just bring the buckets, and you go.
And people just go up and...
Yeah, you go grab some food if you want it.
You were saying before, like sometimes some people would just...
Scoop with their hands.
But it was during COVID, so you're
Yeah.
a little concerned about people just
Yeah.
digging in.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, they had certain precautions that they were doing about COVID, but they would still just have people digging into the bucket for food with their hand.
And so you had an opportunity to read. Were there any good books that you now look back and go, God, I love that book? It helped.
I read some incredible books. I read some great books, but they were all sent in to me by my partner Juliana. With the food parcels, once every 2 weeks she could bring some books, and I was able to send her some requests, and ask her throughout different periods of it. We would get phone calls sometimes semi-regular phone calls with her, with my family, with the U.S. Embassy, and I could request certain books, things I was interested in. But I read some great books, and I read some difficult books that probably some of the solitude there were the only way I would have probably finished some of those books.
Right.
And I read some terrible books. Whatever was around.
You read. And did those books help you sort of escape mentally, sort of transcend the prison, or were you always conscious you were there? Were there moments where you got lost in the book?
There are novels that I got lost in, the way you might in a movie, watching a movie or whatever. It was largely just to kill the day.
Yeah.
I mean, books on your bucket list, you check them off.
Right.
It's mostly a way to kill the time, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the guards, did you have what kind of relationship did you have with the guards?
The guards, well, some of them are really, really kind, nice people, sympathetic. It's hard to get a deep bond because of the language barrier.
Did any of them speak any English at all?
Not a single jail staff member spoke English that I've met. And then some of them were just downright assholes.
Yeah.
I mean, you get the same sort of, any petty person given a little bit of power and authority. It's a pretty universal thing. There was plenty of that.
And how did that play out in terms of you?
Just adherence to really arcane rules that nobody had ever adhered to or followed before, being enforced really, really toughly. And it was difficult because of the language barrier. I didn't always know what I was being told to do or what the rules were.
Was it like keeping the lights on? I know you mentioned that before. Or...
Yeah. So the lights had to stay on through the night, which wasn't a problem until suddenly one guard decided that it was a problem. That same guy, apparently you're not supposed to hang clothes to dry anywhere in front of your doorway, right? And you have this area outside that has barbed wire on the top in a crisscross pattern, so it's very easy to hang things from. And so everybody just hangs from there. And then one day this guy just decided you can hang to this side or to that side, but not in front of the door. And then he just started enforcing that rule. And it took a chain of several people to explain to me what was going on, where I could hang and where I couldn't hang my clothing.
And were there inmates who spoke English? Or?
Yeah, it was the inmates who could speak English. Yeah. There were transitions and changes of the group of people that I was with. Some people got released, some people got moved. So there were at different times, there were different numbers or existence of English speakers.
Right.
But there was a monk, a Buddhist monk, directly next to me,
Right.
who was probably my closest companion, fluent English speaker. And next to him, Muslim Myanmar citizen who spoke fluent English. And that was sort of the social circle.
And what did you guys talk about? Was it, did you
just
talk about politics or just about life or about?
There was plenty of talk about politics, especially towards the end. Early on, it was a lot of government. There were people that a lot of people that supported the military, and there was less political conversation. After they left, there was a lot more because everybody was on the same page.
Right.
But probably much more than that is just random jail, everyday life stuff. And they would talk with everybody else and chuckle it up. And I had no idea what they're talking. I mean, I wasn't always engaged in the everyday chit chat.
Did you ever have a laugh with them?
Plenty. Yeah.
Were people like teasing each other, or was it
people tease each other a little bit. Mostly making fun of the guards. Yeah. And there wasn't a ton of laughing going on, I guess, or maybe I wasn't laughing a ton.
Yeah. Did you find any humor in the books you read or anything like that? Were there times where you were amused, or was that even?
Yeah, I could laugh at books, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you were showing up every 2 weeks. Did you get a sense like this was some type of
I thought
monotony, some joke that?
I thought I'd be there forever because every 2 weeks, because nothing was happening. They shut the courts down because of COVID.
Right.
So nothing could progress.
Right.
So every 2 weeks, they need to tell the jail officers, the court needs to tell the jail officer, court case is still ongoing, keep them in prison. So every 2 weeks, I would video conference with the judge, and they would say, come back in 2 weeks.
And that was it, pretty much?
Yeah, that was the only thing that would happen in that conversation.
What would you think when you would hear that, like 1 week, two hearings, 3 hearings, 4 hearings, where you had just...
I had patience for a while, and then I just started losing hope. I mean, it would drag down for so many months. I didn't think it would get resolved. When they did open up the court to have another hearing, a witness didn't show up. So they couldn't do anything. So they said, all right, let's try again in 2 weeks. So I'm like, finally the courts are back open. Maybe we'll start progressing through the case. But somebody doesn't show up, and the same thing happens. And then at another point, the judge broke her arm, so she was done. She couldn't come to court. It just felt like there's no way the case is ever going to end. There's a bunch of witnesses they have to go through. Everybody that I'm sitting around talking to has been there for a year and a half. Their case has 78 witnesses. They've heard from 12. Yeah.
Rose, how are you getting through this?
It's minute by minute with support from my family and friends, community, Danny's wife from Myanmar, just beyond the world.
The fact it's predominantly a Buddhist country, you're Jewish, did that play any pro or con in anything that was going on? Was that a positive, or was that a negative, or
No,
a neutral?
I think the only impact it had was that I got a lot of questions from other inmates about George Soros. That's really all that happened.
And what'd you tell him?
I said, I don't know the guy. It's just not true.
Is that right?
It's just not true.
Wow.
We don't all know him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did that blow you away that they asked that? Or?
No, because I'd been living in Myanmar already for a couple of years. And it's never offensive or intended as offense. There's just a lot of curiosity and lack of knowledge, and they want to know why, some of us are so successful and intelligent. But then, so that's maybe a couple people. The majority of people don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I say, it's like a Christian.
Yeah.
And I went to church every Sunday, actually.
Oh, you did?
I went to church, not until way later in the sentence, but I went to church because that's it's one way to get out of your little ward, tiny little area, just to do something, to go somewhere. And that's where all the English speakers were.
Oh, really?
So I had a group of friends, a group of West Africans that all spoke English from Nigeria and Ghana and Ivory Coast and Cameroon.
Well, during all this time, you occasionally got to talk to your parents, your brother, relatives in the embassy. Where were you talking when you spoke to them, and was somebody listening, sitting right there with you, or did you just?
Oh, yeah, I was sitting in a kind of an office, just a room, conference room, a small conference room at the front of the prison compound. And yeah, I was sitting at a large table with undercover, although not undercover, police officer.
Sitting right there.
Next to me right here. The superintendent of the prison, some other high-ranking person in the prison, another ditto, something or other, and a translator here, because none of these people, none of these important higher-ups speak English. Translator sitting here taking notes. He debriefs them after the conversation. Sitting there with it on speakerphone.
And so was that uncomfortable to be able to communicate, or did you get used to the fact that this is what we got?
You got used to it pretty quick. The language barrier serves as its own sort of privacy shield, privacy curtain. But also you knew you couldn't talk about certain things. So it wasn't like, that was also a privacy thing, I guess. You weren't sharing intimate thoughts.
I know that your family has been urging the Biden administration to intervene and bring Danny home. We have learned, NBC News has spoken to the White House about the matter, and we learned that the administration is, quote, deeply concerned about Fenster's detention, but did not say Biden would take any personal actions. Quote, we have pressed the military regime to release him immediately.
Did you have any idea of the efforts?
I knew my brother was, well, at some point, people could write me letters, and people were writing me letters and telling me, this is a big deal, this is on BBC and CNN. And someone wrote me and told me, you're not going to believe who's tweeting about Free Danny. Tom Morello, one of my favorite guitar players from Rage Against the Machine. Bono from U2.
How'd you feel when you heard that?
I thought, well, that's cool. I'm still in prison, but I don't think Bono's gonna get me out of prison. But oh, okay. Someday when I'm out of here, that'll be cool. But so I knew that was happening, and that my brother is I know my brother and who he is and what he's capable of, and I knew that he was doing everything he could, and I knew that was an engine driving a massive machine, but I didn't realize how massive.
How massive, and so. At some point, it's dragging on and on and on, and you must be thinking like,
"Oh, I lost hope." Yeah,
how many months did you finally just say, you know what, I'm going to be like this person. I'm going to be here for quite a while.
There was, I think, the major giving up isn't the right thing, but the major sort of acceptance, but more of just a sinking feeling that this isn't going to end. Or this is.
And how do you deal with that? Do you just say,
"Well,
I got to suck it up," or I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it?
Well, that feeling probably happened for the first time about 4.5 months in, and then it goes away, and then it comes back, and then it goes away and comes back. How to deal with it? At one point, I thought, listen, I may be here for 3 years, so I should just assume that I'll be here for 3 years. I could never think about more than that at one time, I don't think. And I started thinking about the things that I enjoyed doing. It's kind of hard to say. And I started thinking about the things that I didn't hate, and if I could just kind of do that for a little while. Started thinking about, well, what if I could get moved to this other ward? Or what if I could live somewhere where this one asshole isn't the guard? You know, I'm dealing with a different set of staff members. Maybe my life would be a little bit better, and then we'll just keep trying every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe I tell myself it's going to be 3 years, but you just still try every 2 weeks. Sometimes that worked, and then other times I was just depressed.
did you start to think, well, maybe that's not a good thing, that I'm a little too high profile now? Bono's.
Well, I wondered, but it's always, I think that in the end was also the thing that helped get me out.
Right.
So even if it kept me there longer, it also got me out.
Right.
And to wonder about what effect it had is a counterfactual that you'll just continue speculating on and never know.
Right.
So I just don't think about it.
Right. Now, people think about prison. They think of prison as being a pretty scary place. Was it scary, and did you ever worry about being physically harmed or anything?
No. I wasn't worried about being physically harmed from the state, from the authorities. I think I had some protection from that as an American. I don't think they wanted that kind of blowback.
Right.
They would keep me in detention, but they wouldn't torture me, which is not, I couldn't say that for everybody. There are definitely people there who have been tortured off-site and then dropped off at the prison.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't a particularly scary place. It was just a frustrating, boring place, and with the frustrations of incarceration. I mean, you're in a tiny confined area that you never ever leave, day in, day out, never ever leave, just a confined area.
So Juliana was bringing food to you. What kind of food was she able to bring for you?
Well, I had to find something to focus on, so I started thinking a lot about health. It was a small area, so I'd run in a small circle to get some exercise and lift weights. There were these makeshift weights there. So I was telling her to send vegetables, fruits, nuts, whole grain cereal, and eating that, and protein powder, shakes and things. I was eating that and trying to space it out and ration it out so that it would last. It never lasted all the way until the next 2-week delivery. But so for about 4 days or so, I'd eat what they provided, but be very hungry because the food was terrible. But that's what she was sending me, and it was a joy. I've never tasted fruit that tastes so good.
What was your favorite fruit?
I think it was a combination of hunger and just privation. A lack of other things. But like, I've never enjoyed a red apple as much as that. And then a mango. When she would send like a ripe mango, once she sent kiwi, it was like, it was insane biting into a kiwi.
And were you able to communicate with her in different ways, or? Not
really. I mean, there was a period early on where I was able to send some notes to her clandestinely, but it didn't work out for long.
Oh, okay.
I was sneaking out letters in various different ways to communicate with her without the censor's intervention.
Right.
And it worked for a little bit, and then I got caught with a note, and then that just worsened my condition. Then staff kept a much more focused eye on me. I lost my ability to write. That was a huge part of the sinking feeling that I had, because reading books was for me like a sort of interactive process.
Right.
I would read with pen in hand and mark up my books and take a lot of notes.
Were you able to do some writing beyond the letters?
Yeah, I was taking notes on everything. And then when I got caught sneaking a note out, they raided the room and took every piece of paper, every pen.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden, the contraband for this prisoner became pens and paper.
Wow.
And everyone made sure that I had never touched a pen or a piece of paper. And that just sucked. That made everything really... After that, I couldn't imagine staying for 3 years. Like, I thought if I could only think about 3 years. I could only think about maybe 1 year, maybe 3 years. But I thought if it happens that I'm going to stay that long, the new mission is find a legal way to have a notebook. Tell them I would like to keep a notebook in the ward officer's office and ask for permission to come write thoughts and ideas and random stories and things that have nothing to do with politics or the prison, and leave it in his office, and he can read it at night if he wants. I'd try to find some legal way to write, but if I had to stay there that long without ever writing something down, That would have been pretty frustrating.
Wow. The trial starts. And did you think that maybe you would be acquitted, or did you
Yeah,
just...
I thought it was possible. I didn't have any predictions, but
Yeah.
I thought it was not impossible. There was another American held there who was beaten and tortured.
Yeah.
He's Burmese American.
Nathan Monk?
Nathan Mong.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the reason that I wasn't is that, you know, the tone of our skin and the shape of our eyes and everything are quite different. I'm sure that protected me. But his case was just randomly dropped in the middle of his trial, and he was let go home. I knew it was possible, but I didn't, you know, expect it.
Were you able to sense any sympathy, empathy from the officers or the guards or the judge?
From the officers, yeah, but then they would just get up and testify. I mean, they're following orders.
Right.
They tell you, look, don't worry, you're gonna go home. But like, this is the system. We have to follow these orders. But they get up and say, look, the Ministry of Information says this guy works at Myanmar now, so he works at Myanmar now. But then they get back down and they're from the stand and they're like, look, we know you didn't do anything wrong. We're really sorry. This sucks. It makes no sense. It makes no sense, and everyone's just following orders.
And were there people reassuring you along that don't worry about it, you're going home, or?
Towards the end, police officers were telling me that, but they didn't know what the hell they were talking about.
Yeah.
People in my ward, prisoners, all thought I'd go home because I was an American, but they thought that for 5.5 months.
Right. And you were having some doubts. So when the verdict comes back and they've convicted you of these things that a lot of people thought was ridiculous, what happened? When you heard the verdict, how did the translator or your lawyer tell you?
Yeah, my lawyer explained to me the verdict after it was read, which, you know, I knew the verdict didn't matter so much, but people had given me a signal that once there was a verdict, there would be a pardon that came with it, like almost instantly.
Like right away, they'll say, okay, you're guilty, but get the hell out of here now.
Yeah. There was an immigration officer at the reading of the verdict, and that day, people had assured me that they actually told me I'd be going from the court to the airport to go home, which they convinced me that morning. They convinced me. A couple days prior, somebody had told me that higher level negotiations had just recently suffered a small setback, but don't worry about it. The outcome will be the same. You're coming home soon. So they read the verdict, and then there was no pardon with it, and everyone just started packing up and leaving, and that was it. Then they brought over the ankle chains, because once you're convicted, you're not just chained here, you're chained by the ankle also. And they just put the ankle chains on. They said, we're going to go back to the prison and you're going to change into the convicted prisoner outfit.
Oh, wow. Did that freak you out when you...
Well, it just seemed like, okay, so I heard there's a setback, and this promise that I was going to the airport from the court also didn't turn out to be true. I just didn't know what... It was confusing and pretty terrifying. I didn't think, okay, I'm definitely about to serve 11 years of hard labor. I didn't think that would happen, but I just didn't know. I just thought, okay, well, now that's a very bad outcome. I'm going to be here a lot longer than I want.
When they talk about hard labor, did you have any idea what that might have meant? Or
honestly, no, not really. I still don't have a clear understanding of that.
Of what that was.
Yeah.
So the next time, so it's Friday, you're convicted, you've got 11 years. You were sitting in the courtroom, were you just overwhelmed by?
Yeah, it was just a pretty deep depression, pretty bummed out. But you know, it leveled off the next day, to be honest. Well, the next day, on Saturday, they woke me up earlier than normal and said, you're getting a COVID swab. So they took me to the front of the prison and gave me a COVID swab, which seemed like really good news. That seems like they're getting ready to put me on an international flight, and they need to make sure I'm negative. But then I immediately thought, you've had a lot of good signals, and that has only made you more depressed.
Right.
So I started thinking, oh no, they're going to move me to a different ward.
Uh-huh.
So I started thinking, oh, life in a different ward might be a little bit better.
Uh-huh.
There
Better
might be-
neighborhood.
There might be some more English speakers.
Right.
I thought, oh, maybe they're going to move you to a different prison. I thought, okay, well, we'll see how that goes. Maybe it'll be more interesting.
Right.
Maybe there'll be more space to run. And I just tried to think of what they might be doing and how it might be a little bit better. And if it's not, then I'll deal with that when I get there. But I just stopped thinking about, does this mean I'm going home or not?
Now, you had COVID at one point. Was that your understanding?
Yeah. I mean,
Were-
they didn't give me a test, but
What were your symptoms and what?
I mean, I got like real sick, like a very bad flu, with a fever for about 3 days. And
And were they attentive at all to you and
no,
helping out?
you just got to sweat it out on your palate.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you complain, you can go to the hospital, but what are they going to do? You've got the flu,
Right.
And then the fever, when the fever breaks and leaves, then you're just sick, you're stuffed up, you're sluggish, you're fatigued.
Right.
But then the taste and the smell going, that's like the indicator that,
Right.
okay, there's a wave of it right now in the country, that must be.
You didn't think like, this is it, I got COVID, I might be...
No, because I don't think COVID is necessarily that. I mean, especially if you're quite healthy.
Yeah.
But and it came and passed, and it wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
But whatever.
Yeah, and so Saturday, nothing's happening. When's the next time that there's some moment of hope or some indication?
After they gave me the swab test, they locked me in my cell 24 hours a day for quarantine, in-cell quarantine. So I couldn't, which is ridiculous because you walk up to the door,
Yeah,
and your people that speak English walk up to this side of the door.
yeah,
You're talking, you're having a normal conversation,
right.
leaning on the same bars. But anyway, there's in prison quarantine, cell quarantine, and that seemed also like a possible good indicator.
Right.
I remember going to the airport once the results come back, but also it could have meant maybe I'm just being transferred to a different prison. So I just tried not to think about it or draw conclusions. The next day on Sunday, they woke me up at 6 a.m. and told me to pack a bag, but they wouldn't tell me where I was going.
And did you think maybe this is it, or do you think maybe you're just going to another part of the prison?
Everybody in my ward was certain that when I got the swab test and then got quarantined, was certain that I'm going home. And I kept saying, listen, how many times have we assumed that? How many times have we been certain? I just don't want to get attached to that idea.
Right.
And then Sunday they came and said, we're going, pack a bag.
And you said we're going.
Yeah, I said where. They said we can't really answer anything, but just whatever. We're handing you off to the police. This is the prison staff.
Right.
So I pack a bag and I get ready to go, and then they take me out to they hand me over to some police, and the police cuff me, feet and hands, and put me in a car full of police officers with guns, and we start driving, and we're driving towards the Yangon airport, which is at the northern end of the city, and then we just keep going. We leave the city, and I see the airport receding behind us, and I asked the guy, the machine gun toting gentleman next to me, where we headed, and he just turns to me and he says, "Don't speak." I said, "Okay." Sounds good. And I was just sitting there looking straight ahead, and we drive 4 hours, and it becomes increasingly clear we're driving to Naypyidaw, which is the capital of the country. And I just tried to assume that didn't mean I was going home, which was easy to do. And it seemed to be easy to assume something very bad is happening. And I was just for the rest of the day left wondering what was happening.
Were you freaking out or just?
I wasn't freaking out because it was a slow process. You have a lot of mundane thoughts.
Right.
And I also thought, well, they move a lot of the big shots up to Naypyidaw, foreign big shots also. Maybe they're putting us up in this house arrest, in a palace for house arrest, like a posh sort of. We're keeping them in our custody, but we'll keep them over here.
Right.
I just tried to pretend that I believed that.
Right.
And I was just waiting to find out what was going to happen. They took me to a police station in the capital and sat me down in front of a desk with an empty large chair, like the boss's chair behind it. They said, sit here and wait. And it was just 4 hours or something like that.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there waiting. I kept turning around and trying to ask people what I was waiting for.
Wow.
And everyone just kept saying...
Was that a long 4 hours of...
I mean, I just spent 5.5 months doing it. So I'm serious. I mean, it was the same. It was the same thing. You just try to entertain yourself with your own thoughts. Right. And then finally, like you can see that golden hour coming. Like the sun is starting to set a little bit, and finally they come over. Some police come over, and the head honcho sits down with a translator that can actually translate very well. And they say, you know that you've been charged with these crimes, right? I said, yes. I said, you know that the state has found you guilty, right? I said, yes. I said, now we would like to offer you a pardon.
You were like,
And it was just, yeah. It was like, I felt like weightless or something, you know?
You said, no thanks, I don't need a pardon.
Yeah. Like, the rainy season just ended. Yeah, I can't remember what else they said along with that. It was a short conversation. I said, I'll take it. They said...
Did you say thank you or just...
Yeah. They wanted to hear thank you. They asked me how it felt to hear the words that I was getting a pardon.
What'd you tell them?
I just kissed their ass as much as they wanted. They were like, no, we just want to make sure, we want you to sign this agreement. We're not impinging on your freedom of expression. We're just saying don't report fake news. And
oh my God.
Don't say anything false about the police or the prisons. You can report and write about it, just don't say anything false or something like that.
Wow.
And be mindful of the sources that you use. And I said, sounds good. Hand me the pen. I said, we'll take you to the airport directly from here.
Were you thinking? What were you thinking when they were saying that? Were you almost
thinking what the
they
agreement?
were telling you the
agreement?
Yeah.
I was listening to the words, and they said, "Don't report fake news." Okay, check. Use good sources. Okay, check.
Right.
I have no problem agreeing to that.
Right.
Did
the phrase "fake news" did that resonate as?
Yeah,
like
they use
something?
that as an actual phrase, as like a legal phrase. There's like a fake news law. So
the Donald Trump law.
Yeah. So I felt comfortable signing that. I thought I was gonna have to pledge my allegiance to Min Aung Hlaing, the number one there. They didn't make me do that. And then they said, we're gonna drive you to the airport, and we're gonna wait until the U.S. representatives show up. The person who helped to negotiate, and the person who showed up and I flew away with, was not representing the U.S. government. He was acting as a private citizen who engages in these sorts of issues.
Right.
But they said, we're going to wait there until these people show up, this delegation shows up,
Right.
and we're going to hold your belongings until they show up, and then we're going to hand all of them over to you and them. And when we got there, it was Bill Richardson, erstwhile governor of New Mexico,
Right.
and Democratic primary candidate once upon a time.
Yeah.
Name came out of nowhere for me. I was like, Bill Richardson just saved me?
And had you heard of him before?
Of course I knew who he was, but I hadn't heard that name since, what was that, 2004 or something?
Yeah, it's quite a while ago. Yeah.
Anyway, he shows up with a private jet full of jumbo prawns and steak and champagne. He says, I'm taking you home. I said, let's do it.
Wait, did you hug him or anything? Or
Yeah,
just,
when we got on the plane, I hugged him and kissed him, and
Yeah.
he said, "Please, you're making me uncomfortable."
Oh, really?
No. Yeah, no, I was thrilled. It was a great flight. I had been craving, one cold beer and one cup of coffee that tasted like coffee. And both were immediately available on the flight.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it wasn't just being released. It wasn't just ending this ordeal. It was ending it in the greatest way possible. It
Right.
was so insane. And immediately getting on the phone with my wife, uncensored.
Was
And
that a
then
dream?
and then
Was
my
it like a
family.
dream-like? Did you feel like almost dream-like that this
Yeah,
was
it
like,
was
wow?
absurd. It was absurd. It just didn't seem, none of it seemed real.
Did you have the shrimp and the steak?
I had the shrimp, and then I opted for one of the other main course options. There were several. It was a pretty baller plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and champagne.
And so did you engage in a lot of conversation
Yeah.
with everyone?
Yeah,
Was there a very celebratory,
yeah.
festive?
It was extremely celebratory. It was also a very, everybody was aware of how serious what had happened was, the process of getting to where we had gotten to was.
Right.
But it was celebratory. I mean, that's the reason that these people do the work that they do. And this is the end of my this 5.5 month thing. So we were all celebrating.
And then you got to also talk to your parents
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So then you slept. Did you get some sleep on the plane, or not
I
much?
don't know why. I don't know what the biology or the psychology of it was, but I went another maybe 36 hours or something, completely unable to sleep.
Wow.
On the connecting flight between Doha and New York, I dozed for like 20 minutes.
Wow. And you went on when you got to Qatar. You got on a commercial.
We got on a commercial flight
Okay.
from Qatar to New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, a long flight from there. You get to New York, and then what do you think when you get out of the car and you see your parents and they?
Oh man, I mean, I knew it was coming, but
Yeah.
it still didn't seem real.
Yeah.
What was more surreal was that, like, my mom came in and hugged me. My brother was trying to get around the cameramen to hug me, and my dad was completely boxed out. There were so many cameramen. I mean, it was my mom and then just a flood of media, and that was bizarre. At Doha, there was some media. But it was a small gaggle of media shouting questions. That was a weird experience.
Right.
But then in New York, it was just a ton.
Or was it overwhelming, or just kind of like, whatever, I'm out, who cares?
It was It wasn't overwhelming. It was surprising, and then it was like, oh yeah, this is a media event.
Yeah. And how was it being in a press conference? Was that just?
It was cool. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I felt pretty ill prepared for it, but they said, yeah, everyone's gonna speak, and then you'll speak, and then there'll be some questions, and this is at the end of me not sleeping for a long time, and I
Right.
still felt weirdly energetic and not sleepy at all. I think it was just the excitement and the relief and all that, and like, honestly, like, every time on every flight somebody offered me a cup of fresh brewed coffee, I said yes, and I just hadn't drank that much coffee in a long time.
You were drinking instant coffee back
Yeah, and
there
it wasn't
in
just
the prison.
instant coffee. I had only had a small thermos that would hold hot water, so I would only have access to hot water at night. So I'd get the water at the night before and dump too many instant packets into the one little bit of hot water so that I would not have a caffeine hangover in the morning. So I was drinking overpowered instant caffeine that I would have to water down in the morning. And just slugging it back to wake up and have some coffee and read a book.
Okay. So now you during the press conference you said, let's not lose sight of what the real story is here. You going there and you being imprisoned, as sort of, a lot of people had never heard of Myanmar before. They didn't know it was Burma, and they didn't, and they didn't realize how horrible things had gotten there, and you being there had really turned attention from a lot of people starting to read about Myanmar. Do you see some positives from all this? Or?
Yeah, absolutely, and especially early on when, I mean, I didn't realize it was my individual case was such a big story, but a friend wrote a letter and he said, I'm not calling anything about this positive. A friend of mine who does journalism there, he said, I'm not calling anything about this positive. He's like, but we all knew after in February, it was a big story, and the international media was following the coup, and we all knew that wouldn't last very long, and it didn't. The interest died down pretty quickly, and he said, "But you know what? You brought the story of Myanmar back into the international headlines." And he's like, the country needs that." He's like, "So, if you are looking for meaning while you're in there," and this was, in that earlier period where I still hadn't crashed and I was still hopeful, and I looked at it as a really positive thing that was actually kind of worth it. And when I talk about keeping it focused on the story, I mean, if I'm sitting here talking about my experience and I'm mentioning coffee that didn't taste good, and I'm mentioning boredom,
Right.
and at the same time I'm mentioning other prisoners that I know were tortured, what's the story here?
And were there other journalists you were able to converse with there, or not?
In brief snatches, and I saw a couple local journalists that I knew before that were in there, but they quickly separated me from any journalists and most political detainees, although that was getting pretty impossible. There's just too many of them. There were some in my ward.
So Frontier Myanmar it's still publishing the magazine. Is that your understanding, or?
Frontier Myanmar stopped printing during COVID because the printers shut down. First wave 2020 COVID. We started reprinting again for a brief period until COVID. I don't remember the timeline, but COVID might have shut it down again, and then the coup made us just be like, well, we're just done printing for now. You'll get more attention in print if you're printing. So we were publishing online. We became an online-only outlet throughout coverage of the coup. Right now, I believe we've stopped online publication, possibly except for some member email services.
And most of the journalists have left the country, or is that your understanding, or?
There are a lot of journalists that have remained and are still working really hard.
Yeah.
But a lot of journalists most foreign journalists have left. A lot of local journalists have left. A lot of media outlets have shut down voluntarily, or the states shut them down, ordered them to shut. But a lot of media is shut down. I mean, it's almost state media only right now.
And so you left as the managing editor. What happens to is that are you done with Myanmar now, or is that still a question?
I don't know. I mean, there's talks that are ongoing right now. So I don't know. The future is open. But there's a transition taking place where everything's up in the air, and there's a bit of a pause. So we're gonna figure out what that means.
Would you ever go back to Myanmar?
I don't think I'd be allowed to go back.
Yeah. I mean, most people would say you'd be crazy to go back, right? But
I didn't say I wouldn't go back. I said they won't let me back.
Right. But I might feel
go back.
Your heart, you still feel some connections there.
Yeah, I think even maybe more so. I think when I was leaving, I felt like I was I might have been wrapping things up. Yeah. I feel now particularly wedded to the place.
Obviously, people ask you, do you think about writing a book about your experience, doing a movie on it, or is that not something really?
My line right now is that it'd be really hard to dramatize 5.5 months of staring at a wall. But there's writing to be done. I don't think there's a book's worth of writing to be done, but there's a lot of writing to be done. No, don't wait.
Within minutes of landing from overseas at Kennedy Airport, Danny Fenster is hugging his mother, father, and brother. For the last 5.5 months, he's been locked up with no end in sight.
You came back here, and then you sort of got a little better impression and started reading stories about what people have been writing about and the magnitude of the case. Your parents were on CNN, your brother, and MSNBC. Were you surprised by just the whole magnitude of the campaign to get
Yeah.
free Danny Fenster?
Yeah, it's still surreal. There's an archive online of a lot of the coverage, and this morning I read May's coverage, and that's 6 or 7 days, and I got through
Right.
I got through that this morning, and I had to put it down. Maybe I'll try for another month, another day, the next day, maybe read a month at a time, maybe, I don't know, a week's worth at a time. There's a lot of coverage, and I'd like to look at as much of it as I can, but it's pretty overwhelming. It's pretty, I don't really have the words to describe.
And how now that you're back here and people see you, and they're like, "Oh my God!" People are very emotional. The community, really, beyond even this community, but really the world and the States, people were rooting for you. A friend from the Washington Post in the morning texted me and said, "Danny Fenster's free." Is that sort of still trying to grasp the magnitude of it all?
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, but it's sort of expected. We know what media events are and what celebrity is, and I'm just grateful. I mean, when people are happy that I've been released, I mean, what can you be but grateful?
Right. And when you pulled up here and you saw this big sign in front, was that embarrassing?
Yeah, that's probably the description. I mean, the Welcome Home Danny one in front of my parents' place. Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing. But seeing the signs saying Free Fenster all over the city is just completely, just gratitude. It's just humbling gratitude. I don't know what else to say.
Right. And so now, obviously, you want to decompress and all that stuff. I know I'll ask you, and I feel almost guilty asking you, like, what's next.
Yeah.
But
I have no idea. I mean, it's this might have opened up opportunities that I've never thought about. So it's going to take a lot of thinking about them.
Right. Sort of process it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back. Welcome home. Thanks for sitting down. And,
yeah. Hey, I love Deadline.
Appreciate it. I appreciate it. People still talk about your M&M Myanmar story.
Nice.
Which you got a second place award.
Yeah, from SPJ?
Yeah.
Detroit SPJ?
Yeah.
Nice.
So.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks again, Dan.
Yeah, of course.
It's great.
Yeah.
Great seeing you.